Let's talk about one battle, just 90 minutes long, but those 90 minutes created two completely different national legends that are still powerful today. This is the story of the Battle of Chapultepec. On one side, you have the United States Marine Corps. For them, it's a legendary victory, literally the first line of their anthem from the halls of Montezuma. But on the other side, for Mexico, it's a story of tragic, heroic sacrifice, honored with this massive, beautiful monument. So, how does that happen? How can a single event mean such radically different things to two countries? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back to the final bloody days of the Mexican-American War. All right, so the year is 1847. The U.S. Army, led by General Winfield Scott, has fought its way deep into Mexico, and now they are right on the doorstep of the capital itself, Mexico City. Now, Scott's whole campaign was a huge gamble. I mean, he marched his army inland, totally cut off from his own supply lines. After a string of really tough victories and a particularly brutal fight just a few days earlier, his army was tired, it was depleted, but it was in position for one final push. So inside the U.S. command, a huge debate is going on. General Scott gets his officers together, and pretty much all of them, including a young captain you may have heard of, Robert E. Lee, they all argue for an attack from the south. But Scott, he overrules every single one of them. He decides the key is to attack from the west, which meant they had to take one major obstacle first, Chapultepec Castle. And let's be clear about the stakes here. The U.S. brought about 2,000 soldiers for the main attack, defending the castle, just over 800 men under General Nicolás Bravo. And here's the kicker. Part of that defending force was a group of young military cadets. So the stage was set for this incredibly dramatic assault on what was really a palace on a hill. You have to imagine what it looked like. This castle is sitting up on a 200-foot hill, just towering over the landscape. But here's the thing, it looked way tougher than it was. It was never built to be a real military fortress. It used to be a royal palace, and now it was Mexico's military academy. Its walls just were not designed to stand up to a modern artillery attack. Okay, so here's how the attack went down. On September 12th, the U.S. artillery just pounds the castle all day long. It's relentless, just smashing the defenses and terrifying the soldiers inside. Then, the next morning at 8 a.m., the cannons go silent, and the infantry charges from three sides at once. American soldiers are racing up the slopes with huge ladders, fighting their way up and over the walls. And the whole thing, this final brutal fight, it was over so fast. From the moment the infantry charged to the moment General Bravo surrendered, the entire battle for the castle took 90 minutes. By 9:30 in the morning, the American flag was flying over Chapultepec. Mexico's top commander, the famous General Santa Anna, he was watching this all happen from a distance. And this quote from him just says it all. You can just feel the absolute frustration and the sense that his forces were just getting steamrolled. But the military victory, that's really only half the story. Because it's what was happening inside those castle walls that would create one of Mexico's most powerful and lasting national legends. So as the American troops are pouring over the walls, the Mexican commander, General Bravo, he orders a retreat. But 6 of the young cadets, and we're talking about kids really, from 13 to 20 years old, they refused the order. They decided to stay and fight to the death. These 6 would go down in history as Los Niños Héroes, the boy heroes. And the most famous part of their story, the image that every school kid in Mexico knows, is the legend of Juan Escucha. The story goes that as the last one standing, he grabbed the Mexican flag, wrapped it around himself, and leaped from the top of the castle so the enemy could never capture it. Now, historians will tell you there's not a lot of hard evidence for this specific act. But you know what? In a way, it doesn't matter. The story became this incredible symbol of patriotism and sacrifice. And the cadets weren't the only ones who met a tragic fate that day. There was another group fighting for Mexico called the St. Patrick's Battalion. It was this really unique unit made up mostly of Irish immigrants and other foreign-born soldiers who had deserted the U.S. Army and switched sides. And their end was just grim. 30 of them had been captured earlier, and they were brought to a nearby town, forced to stand on gallows with nooses around their necks and watch the entire battle. The American commander gave a specific order. They were to be hanged at the precise second that the American flag went up over the castle. It was a brutal, symbolic end to a story that, depending on your view, is either about treason or about fighting for your conscience.
So once Chapultepec fell, it was really the beginning of the end for the city.
With the castle in their hands, the American forces, including some future Civil War generals you might recognize, like Lieutenant Ulysses S. Grant, they immediately pushed their attack toward the city's main gates. By that night, they'd broken through, and Santa Anna's army just collapsed. It melted away. But this final victory came at a really high price. In just those few hours of fighting for the castle and the gates, you're looking at hundreds killed and wounded on both sides, a truly brutal cost for control of the capital. Just a few months later, the war officially came to an end with a treaty. And in that treaty, Mexico was forced to give up what is now the entire American Southwest. We're talking about nearly half of its territory. In one single conflict, the map of North America was redrawn forever. So let's circle all the way back to our original question. Why does this one battle resonate in such profoundly different ways in two different countries? Well, for the United States, Chapultepec was a clear-cut, decisive military win. It became a symbol of grit and skill, and it's celebrated in the Marines' hymn. But for Mexico, the battle was this deep national trauma. And out of that trauma, they created a story that turned a devastating loss into this incredible symbol of heroic defiance. And you see this pattern a lot in history, right? The victors tend to remember the tactical brilliance, but nations that suffer a defeat often find a way to remember the sacrifice to build a story that preserves their national pride. One battle, two very different legacies. A story of victory and a story of sacrifice. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What do the stories a nation chooses to tell about its past, especially its most painful losses? What do those stories really tell us about who they are? Thanks for joining me for this one.